Hi, Miss King here, and this screencast we're going to look at the cell theory. So around 1665, there was a monk named Robert Hooke, and he used a compound light microscope, one of the first compound light microscopes, to look at a thin slice of cork, which comes from the bark of a tree. So it's basically plant product. And he made this drawing of those cork cells that he saw. At the time, when he looked at these little structures, he thought that they looked a lot like the rooms in his monastery, or the chambers in his monastery. And those chambers are called cells, like a jail cell. And so he decided to name these little structures cells. So Robert Hooke is the man that gave cells their name. A little bit later, we have Anton van Leeuwenhoek. He looked at some water, some pond water, and saw some little tiny creatures swimming around in there, and he decided to call those little creatures animalcules. And he's also one of the very first people to use the compound light microscope. Matthias Schleiden came up with the idea that plants are made of cells. Theodor Schwann was another scientist that came up with all animals are made of cells. And then Rudolf Virchow concluded that the nucleus part of the cell is where the cell division is responsible. And so together, all of those scientists came up with what we now today have as the cell theory. So the cell theory has three parts. The first part states that all organisms are composed of one or more cells. So all living things must have cells. The second part says that the cell is the basic unit of organization of organisms. That means that cells are the building blocks of living things. And the third part of cell theory says all cells must come from pre-existing cells. So what that means is cells reproduce to form new cells. So new cells come from old cells. Now there's two different categories of cells that we're going to be studying. And that depends on whether or not the cell has a nucleus. So the first category of cells is called eukaryotes. Eukaryotes, eu meaning true and kary meaning nucleus. Eukaryotes contain a nucleus in their cell. Prokaryotes, pro meaning first and kary meaning nucleus. So this is actually before the nucleus formed. So these cells do not contain a nucleus. There are some other differences between the two. Prokaryotes, besides not having a nucleus, they're usually single-celled organisms. That means the whole organism is made up of only one cell. Whereas eukaryotes are mostly multicellular organisms. The DNA structures are different. Also, prokaryotes have a circular or loop-shaped DNA, where eukaryotes have chromosomes, or that double helix structure for their DNA. Prokaryotes do not have organelles. These are membrane-bound organelles, where eukaryotes do, and those are the things like chloroplasts and mitochondria. Eukaryotes have those, but prokaryotes do not. The ribosomes in prokaryotes are very, very small in comparison to the ribosomes in eukaryotes. And most prokaryotes reproduce by asexual reproduction. That's where there's only one parent. And then eukaryotes reproduce by sexual reproduction, so there will be two parents involved. Prokaryotes are usually a lot smaller than eukaryotes. And some examples, prokaryotes are bacteria, things like staph and strep. And for eukaryotes, these are plant and animal cells. So human cells, orange tree cells, rose cells. Now, there are some similarities between the two. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have a cell membrane. That's the membrane that wraps all the way around the whole cell. And they both have DNA. Remember, all living things must have DNA. So if we look at that in a picture, the prokaryotic cell you can see right here is very, very, very small in comparison to this big giant eukaryotic cell. We could actually take this prokaryotic cell and put it inside the eukaryotic cell because it's so much smaller. You can see that there's cytoplasm, and the eukaryote also has cytoplasm. And then the cell membrane that wraps around the cell, and you can see the cell membrane on the eukaryotic cell. Now this one has a nucleus, but the prokaryotic does not. And then it also has these organelles where the prokaryote cell does not. And you can see that the organelles are actually a little bit bigger than the prokaryotic cells. So that may be one of the reasons why prokaryotes don't have these organelles, because it's too small. So to give you a picture, a real picture of what that might look like, here is a human cell, this pink thing, and then the dark pink spot in the middle is the nucleus. So you can see the nucleus in that cell. Now, you'll also notice these little almost purple looking stringy things. These are actually little colonies of bacteria cells. So these are streptococcus cells, and there's probably in each one of these little strips there's hundreds of little cells connected together. So that's how small they are, hundreds of them in this little line right here, and they all fit inside the eukaryotic cell. So they are very, very small in comparison to the eukaryotes. Okay?